I am Tommy Valentine. I am the Executive Director of Historic Athens. We're so glad that you chose to spend this moment of your valuable time with us. This is the third episode we've done. You might have tuned in on Monday with Broderick Flanagan or Tuesday with Deborah Gonzalez. If you didn't catch those interviews, we urge you to, feel free to go back to facebook.com/historic Athens and review those. We are doing 55 total of these interviews. I guess I should start out just by highlighting this. The name of the program is This Moment in History, COVID-19 in Athens, Georgia. So for 11 weeks, we're doing 55 interviews. We've had 11 weekly sponsors. We'll be thanking them as we go through each week. If you'd like to see a full list of sponsors, you can visit our Facebook page. This week has been brought to you by Gary and Joan Birch, and so we really appreciate their support in making this possible. One last frame, just so you know what you're watching. Our job as Historic Athens for 52 years as a nonprofit has been to celebrate and conserve the community heritage of Athens, Georgia. Oftentimes that means fighting for spaces, whether it's a building or a cemetery or a historic site. But sometimes it's also about celebrating and conserving stories, and that's what we're doing here. At the conclusion of this 55 episode series, we are looking to contribute all this audio and visual content to our local libraries and research institutions, so that in the same way that right now, some of us have been looking back at the impact of the 1918 flu in Athens, Georgia, and that data, and helping us inform our decisions now, and sometimes comfort us now. We hope that these interviews will do the same years from now. So our guest today is Dan Geller. I'll be bringing him online in just a moment here. But for those of you around Athens, you may know Dan in a number of different capacities. We'll explore his story and how he connects with our community here in a moment. But Dan is many things. For so many of us, I know for me, I first met Dan through his impact with the music scene. But we're going to be talking to him today as a community member, as somebody who thinks about things from a scientific slant, but then also as someone who is a business owner or is part of a business, is the CTO of a very important local business. And we'll talk about how this is impacting him. As a last note, before the interview begins, we have a comment section right below this live video. And if you have any questions for Dan or comments for us, please jump into the comment section and please share them. I can share them on screen. We can go through them with Dan. And if you have questions now, go ahead and load them up and let's we'll kind of go through them as we go. So once again, jump in the comment section if you have anything that you'd like to share. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and bring Dan in with us. So just a moment, let's go ahead and get him in our stream.
Hello.
Okay. All right. Hello, Dan. Thanks for joining us.
How you doing?
As good as can be expected, right? That's one of the, of all the things that has changed since coronavirus started. That's the question I always have the hardest time now asking people and answering, but we hope that you're doing as well as possible. Dan, as I mentioned, a lot of our audience is probably familiar with you or has interacted with you, but we're going to certainly have some people tuning in who aren't. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship to this community and what you do?
Sure. So I moved here in 1991 originally to go to school. I was going to go to Georgia Tech, and I went and visited Georgia Tech and realized it just wasn't for me. And the people I was staying with brought me up to Athens. They were alumni, and they said, well, maybe you'll like, the University of Georgia better. And I was coming from Milwaukee. I was coming from pretty far away. And I remember vividly, I tell this story all the time, and this is the honest truth. They drove me to Athens. They parked in front of Oglethorpe House, the dorm. I got out of the car and I remember putting my foot on the ground and it was like electric. I was like, this is where I'm going to live. I saw my whole future in front of me. It was really weird. And here I am, 30 years later, I'm still here. And I don't know what it was, but there was something that told me I was going to live in Athens. Now, in between, I moved to New York City and did a bunch of other stuff, but I always came back. And Athens has really become my home, my second home at least. So got my degree here, my first degree, undergrad, biochemistry. went to grad school for engineering here, and at that time started a record label called Kindercore Records, which was releasing basically our friend's band. I had a band called Kincaid at the time. We were trying to get signed. We had no luck. So I said, why don't we just do it ourselves? So I teamed up with our drummer, Ryan Lewis, and we started Kindercore Records. And really what happened was there was an avalanche of really good bands at the time, and everybody wanted labels. So there we were. We just started putting out bands. One day we were sitting around playing Super Nintendo, Star Wars on Super Nintendo, and the phone rang and somebody was placing an order for 100 of our 7-inches that we had pressed. And we had no idea what that meant. Like, we had just been selling them on tour and locally and stuff. And all of a sudden we had orders, right? And they wanted us to have a fax machine. Those of you in the future, this was this archaic piece of technology that you would send. Actually, they may still have them in 50 years because there's some people that still will need to use them. But anyway, we got a fax and we had to find a fax machine to get it. And it was all this crazy stuff. And suddenly we had a business on our hands. And I was finishing grad school. So I dumped all of my assistantship money into this record label. We were living, of course, pretty meagerly at the time. And it took off. We got lucky. There were some really great bands in town that we were able to sign. We got some money from a label in LA and we moved to New York City for a couple of years. And really what we learned in New York City is our hearts were still in Athens. The bands we wanted to sign were still in Athens. We lived in New York City and we signed one band in New York City and they sounded just like an Athens band. And at the time, Athens bands were this kind of retro 60s, 1960s pop music that was really popular, the kind of like the Beatles. I'm sure in 50 years, people remember the Beatles. So everybody sounded like the Beatles. And there were a bunch of bands in Athens that sounded like that. So we moved back to take care of them. We found we could live a lot better here, obviously. And from then on, Athens really became our home for sure. And so time went on. We had to transition from physical formats. So we were selling compact discs and vinyl records at the time. And we were transitioning to digital. So everything was kind of becoming, on the internet, and you were able to download stuff. That also led to a lot of theft, right? So people were downloading everything for free, and it became really hard to sell music right at the end of the 1990s going into the next century. It was really hard to sell music because everybody was able to download it for free, and there wasn't a lot of enforcement about that. Meanwhile, we had a band, Ryan and I, that was getting popular called The Agenda that was in Athens. And that basically sent us on a world tour. We let some other people run our business. When we returned from that world tour, our business had been stolen. So suddenly we have no record label, we have no money, and we're trying to figure out what to do with our lives. I went back to the university and started working in a faculty position, doing research on alternative fuels. And then at that point, I also started a PhD. I could have finished my PhD previously, but the call of the road and being famous, kind of stole me away from that. So I picked up my studies, resumed getting my PhD, worked on alternative fuels at the university. And then we jump ahead. Was in a bunch of bands, started DJing at clubs as Twin Powers and the Booty Boys. And we jump ahead a few years to 2016. And Ryan Lewis comes back to me and says, hey, I got a great idea. Why don't we start a vinyl record press making 12-inch and 7-inch vinyl records? Which at the time didn't seem to make a lot of sense because, as I said, we had really transitioned to digital formats by that point. But there was a resurgence of interest in vinyl. We seemed really uniquely positioned to do it. A guy named Cash Carter stepped in the picture who actually had the idea, who moved here from Florida and convinced us to start doing it. So we went out and tried to get investors, and we did magically get some great investors that helped us put this plant, this record pressing plant, on the ground in Athens, Georgia. I finished my PhD right around the same time. One of the big things we wanted to do is replace the vinyl that we were making vinyl records with renewable materials, so transitioning from petroleum to renewables. Still working on that, but that's something that we have a big goal of achieving. And then also very recently, I have transitioned from being faculty in the College of Engineering. In addition to that, now I'm working for the Innovation District, the Innovation Gateway at the University of Georgia in the startups program. So I'm helping people at the university start businesses. Mainly faculty and graduate students. So that's kind of bringing us up to date. The main thing I'm doing right now in the community is, well, the main things, I guess, I am working with that group to help people start businesses. So working on entrepreneurship and that type of stuff. I'm a DJ in the Booty Boys, which is a hip hop DJ group. I also do a bunch of goth and alternative DJ stuff under various names. I'm in a band called Vision Video, which is a retro goth band. And by retro, I mean 1980s retro. And finally, is there anything else? Oh yeah, I own the record. I help run the record plant, right? Is that everything? I think so. Yeah, yeah, that's everything.
That's all. That's all you do.
You're, you're,
Just one or two. Dan, I want to. We were already seeing some comments in the comment section, so I just want to bring up some of them. One, so let's start with this one. It's just a note of encouragement. Deborah Gonzalez, who was our guest yesterday, just said she loves Kindercore and that you're here. Thanks for being one of the reasons that Athens is amazing. So we agree, Deborah. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Here's a good question to start out with. So Jeremy Field tuned in. He had this question. You may or may not know, but what's the best way for us to support our local record shops right now? And then there's a follow-up question. And how can vinyl buyers support your company in particular?
Yeah, so the record shops, it's tough right now, right? Artists don't do mail orders, so they're kind of hurting right now. But Wuck Street has been so resilient. I really think Wuck Street, if they could pull through the transition to digital and still survive, I have all the faith in the world that Wuck Street is still going to be a thriving business, and same with all the other shops in town. But as far as supporting us, it's difficult because now we press records made to order, sort of. So when we were running a record label, you knew how you could buy our records, right? We'd press a Montreal record. Somebody else would actually manufacture that, and then you go buy that on Montreal record, and you're supporting us. Now people come from all over the world, and we make records, and we ship them off, and they're gone, right? So really, the only way to know if you're supporting us is, are you buying records that we pressed? And a lot of places don't publicize who's actually pressing those records. Certainly supporting local labels like New West, for example, they do most of their pressing with us. So if you're supporting local music, 80% of the time, it's going to be somebody that came and pressed with us. Some bands don't have a choice because their label has to deal with somebody else. But also right now, there's not many people running, and we are up and running right now. I guess that's an important thing to talk about. Kindercore Vinyl is pressing records right now. We're considered essential because we're manufacturing. We have 4 people in a giant facility for each shift. So everybody is, I mean, aside from the people who are working on the presses that are about 20 feet apart, everybody else is 100 feet apart, at least in our facility. And it's a lot of family too, family and friends that are, working together, sort of sheltering in place together as a unit. Everybody that works there knows what everybody's doing all the time. If we catch somebody on Instagram or something outside of Kindercore, they're going to be in trouble if they're trying to work there. So I think they all know that. A few people are still working from home. So we are taking care of that, but we're making records, and there's not a lot of people doing that right now. So it's been sort of good for business because we're getting a lot of the business that can go elsewhere right now. So we're getting a lot of new customers who are trying us for the first time. The problem right now is getting paid. We've manufactured records, and some people just can't afford to pay right now because the priorities have shifted since they made that order. So we're struggling with that right now, but it's been an interesting time for us because we are able to stay open.
Dan, I could be remembering this incorrectly, but do I remember that recently Kindercore did have some sort of special, or there was some sort of way? So if we have any artists listening to this that want to have their records pressed with Kindercore, is there anything like that going on?
Yeah, so we run this special periodically on 7-inch vinyl, so on singles, and it's basically white label, white sleeve, black vinyl, or whatever regrind that we have, which is the recycled vinyl that we use, and we can offer that at a discount to local bands. So yeah, if you're looking to press 307 inches, which is the order that we look at for that, that's the minimum, and usually that's a pretty good number for a local band to press. My band just pressed 307 inches. You can get a good deal on that right now. The thing that's happening though is we're getting this stacked up order queue, because not only are we getting these orders from people that have nowhere else to go, we have a smaller shift, right? We're not running as many people in the facility at a time. So we're playing a lot of catch up right now. Again, which is good. It's just hopefully everybody will pay at the end of that path, right? So.
Yeah. Bring on. So Jennifer Lewis just said Vision Video, awesome. So that's always a plus. I know that it was pretty cool. I live in the neighborhood where just a couple doors down, you all played for Porch Fest, and I know that made a really big impression on everybody. The red and black photos and like a lot of the imagery we'll be using as we get ready for this upcoming year's Porch Fest. I know a lot of those images are going to come from the Goth House Vision Video show. So
that was a great show for us too. You don't know what to expect with that, right? I mean, Dustin, the singer from my band who lives right across the street from you, was really excited about it. I'm like, I don't know what this is going to be like. Don't get too excited. And then it turned out to be one of our biggest shows to date for us. So it really worked out well.
Well, we appreciate, all the artists that do Porch Fest. For those of you that don't know, donate these performances, which is pretty significant for bands. Because if you're a band in Athens, you're asked to do approximately one free show per hour. So that's a lot. Dan, when I was reading about the 1918 flu, some of the hygiene protocols they had in place were really fascinating to delve into. For example, the mayor passed a no spitting in public rule, which,
Pretty good rule.
yeah, if we could still have that, that would be great. But I'm sure that 50 years from now or more, folks are going to tune in and try to parse through what we were doing to stay safe. And I was really interested to hear what you were saying about working these shifts, limited shifts, but in this very giant space, but with an eye towards best practices and keeping everyone safe. Can you go into more technical details on that? Kind of how does that work? 50 years from now, what should people understand about what it's like to run a vinyl operation in these conditions?
Well, I think any manufacturing is probably dealing with this. And again, one advantage we have, I guess I didn't mention, is our presses are automated. So they're robots that are they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Normally we have 3 presses right now, and normally you would have 2 to 3 people on each press. But because of the way that our facility is designed, it's these new presses. The last presses were designed in the 50s. The last manufactured ones ended sometime in the 80s. And then there hadn't been any new design presses until 2016, 2017. And we were the second people in the world to get these new automated presses. So we have one person, essentially we have 2 people running 3 presses. That's about the number so we have 2 people pressing and then 2 people doing quality control and assembly, right? So that's sort of the setup at the facility right now. And because we do have this amazingly big space that we're hoping to grow into, we're able to space everybody really far apart, right? What you worry about is facilities that have a lot of manual labor and they're cramped into these facilities. How do they maintain what they're saying 6 feet is what, but who knows, right? I mean, nobody really knows how far that virus can travel. We don't have a challenge maintaining that 6 feet, but I think a lot of assembly facilities might. So, that's something that I think a lot of our colleagues are worrying about out there. And one thing we're struggling with is deliveries. We have people delivering stuff every day. Maintaining safety during that transition between coming in our building and exiting our building, leaving packages with cardboard that have been touched by other people. This is something everybody's concerned with right now. There's a lot of studies looking at how long the virus can survive on different surfaces. And it seems like it's quite a long time, for example, on cardboard, right? So that's a little frightening for our employees. It's something that I think they all are very conscious of. And really, it's what everybody is individually comfortable with. Our employees are mainly young. Ryan is probably our oldest that works there. I'm the oldest one in the business, so I'm not saying he's the old guy. I'm the old guy, but he's probably more concerned than the 20-year-olds that we have coming in to help stuff. And that's a lot of what we're seeing in Athens, right? We have a very young population here, and we have a very old population here. And there's this weird dichotomy where getting the young people to realize their impact on that older population has been, I think, a struggle for everybody in the United States. But I think Athens really encapsulates that, because of that weird gap between retirees and students that we have here.
Yeah. So there's a number of things that I'm looking forward to delving into here in just a moment. Once again, we've appreciated the questions. So if anyone's tuning in live and wants to add a question, just throw it in the comment section below. I'm just going to take this quick opportunity to thank our sponsors. These are our annual sponsors that support Historic Athens. And so we just really want to emphasize that, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We're just as vulnerable as anybody right now. And we really appreciate everyone who's willing to become a sponsor or a member. You can become a member for as little as $5 a month. Just go to historicathens.com. Every donation helps. So please consider that. And also thank you to the people you see on the screen for helping us continue our mission to celebrate and conserve the community heritage of Athens, Georgia. So I want to make sure to touch base on that. And yeah, once again, if you want to become a member, there's lots of ways to help. Dan, getting back into the program here for a second, I know that renewability, sustainability, those are things that are important to you. How is this moment, I'm thinking about how much discussion there's been about toilet paper or paper towels, or, my wife and I were talking the other day that we've never had a roll of paper towels last as long as
Yeah.
we have during this period of time because we're having to deal with scarcity. Uh, what do things look like both in the present and in your kind of thoughts on the future on how this might impact and is impacting sustainability? Any thoughts there?
Well, one thing I think that's really significant right now is our use of fossil fuels has dropped dramatically during this time, right? There's a lot of arguments that this is Mother Nature sort of adjusting for the damage that humans have done over the years. I mean, and it's working, right? I mean, we are using way less fuel, the price of fuel is dropping, having a huge effect on the economy, but also having a positive impact on the environment right now. I mean, greenhouse gas emissions are down right now worldwide, which is a really interesting side effect of this, right? I think that's something that we may miss through all the noise, that there's a lot less fuels being burned right now. So that's interesting. And of course, the problem with the paper goods is they're going to get used. We're not using, I was thinking about this morning, everybody's going to the bathroom as much as they ever have been, right? So our use of toilet paper is it's hard for the facilities to keep up because it's a constant need, right? They can kind of predict how much toilet paper people are going to use based on populations. And for them, they've been, kind of like caught off guard with this, and it's hard for them to pick up production simply because they don't have the facilities to do so, right? And their supply chain is damaged, so there's lots of issues there. I think there's going to be lasting effects of this conservation mentality on these specific products, right? I think on these paper products, we're all going to be, for the rest of our lives, and any kids that are growing up right now are going to use, one square, let's say, and for the foreseeable future. And I don't think that's going to go away. I think that's probably going to be a lasting impact on people. So maybe, after this all runs out, the poor toilet paper companies are going to be selling less toilet paper.
Right.
But yeah, there are some positive impacts on the environment that are coming from this without question. And I take it back to energy consumption, right? Our electricity use has probably gone down considerably because a lot of facilities that would be running aren't running, right? And a lot of the cooling that we're doing in buildings that are unoccupied right now or have less people in them, that's going to save a lot of energy. So that's going to be interesting when this is all done, to go back and do the study and see what happened to energy consumption, greenhouse gas emissions during this time.
So, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. In some ways, I think what so many of us are trying to determine is, are we learning new habits, or are we becoming a coiled spring where the moment that we're able to get out, it's like everyone's taking cross-country road trips.
Toilet paper parties.
Right. But, you think about, so much. One of the things that at Historic Athens we've been talking a lot about is, for so many of us, history is what we learned K through 12, and just kind of appropriated from people around us. And it's fascinating to me, since this moment has happened, all this has come out about how many waves of epidemics and pandemics our past generations endured, in the 50s and in kind of the World War I era. And we think about those generations and how resource scarcity is part of their mentality. You clean your plate, you use what you have. And I think up until this moment, I thought that those habits have been developed based on wartime or something. But there's this kind of like missing piece to the story that we weren't telling about the way that pandemics or health-related crisis like this bakes that in. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that matter, but just kind of what have you found yourself learning from this?
Yeah, it's interesting. One thing, I think everybody will probably have a closet full of toilet paper for the next 20 years, right? I mean, and hope, then the supply chain will catch up and it'll be fine, and you'll just restock that, I guess. But yeah, as far as lessons learned, I don't know if I'm there yet, right? I don't know if the data is all in on what is the lasting impacts on my behavior is going to be. One thing that's interesting is I'm a very public person. I like to go out. I DJ. I'm in bands. I go out on the weekends still, and a lot of my friends have been asking me, "Wow, man, you must really be bummed out. This must be super hard for you to have to stay home." And for those of you in the future, a big thing that's happening in the current zeitgeist is FOMO, fear of missing out, right? Like that was what everybody was worried about because of the preponderance of social media, and you don't want to miss anything your friends are doing. You see them doing these cool things online and you want to be there. And I tell my friends, listen, man, nobody's out there doing anything right now. I'm not missing anything.
You're
So
not
that
missing out on anything, yeah.
not happening for me. I mean, I want to go out and stuff, but like it's not this huge pull because there's nothing to do, right? So for me,
Right.
it's been kind of interesting. Like I thought I would be really stir crazy too, but I'm not. I'm like, okay, well, there's no reason to go out because nobody's doing anything. If everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, there shouldn't be anything to do, right?
Yeah, you do see a lot of people where there was so much focus on external FOMO. It seems to me, and I don't know if you'd agree, there's a greater understanding these days of what we might have been missing out on in our homes. I mean, for those of us that are fortunate enough to live with our partners or spouses or um, significant others, or maybe we have a family member we live with or a child, like in the pursuance of that external what's going on downtown tonight FOMO, we might have been missing some of our quality time. Now there's no shortage of quality time. um, but have it's you said not all the data's in. Let me ask you this question. So, this has been it's crept in. I mean, we first started hearing reports on the periphery late last year, increasingly at the beginning of the year. And then, right around the time of spring break, it's like the anvil just dropped. Can you think back to how your personal habits have changed, kind of throughout that period? Did it seem to come out of nowhere for you? Were you already making adaptations? Are you like the rest of us where you realize, gosh, I thought I was washing my hands a lot, but I really wasn't washing them as much as I thought I was? What kind of changes have you made in your life?
Yeah, well, as far as hand washing goes, my lovely fiance Lindsay Lay would tell you that I did not wash my hands properly. She's in the healthcare field, and she's always criticized my hand washing methodology. And she still sits outside the bathroom when we come back from like picking up stuff at Kroger or whatever, and counts. And if I come out, before that 20 seconds is up, she's sending me back. So yeah, definitely going to wash my hands longer, I think is one of the things. But as far as anticipation goes, I'm in the scientific community, and I think we saw this coming. We started having discussions about this, last year. I think is when we were starting to talk about it, and we joked. I think we all look back, and there were so many jokes about this at because I would do Zoom meetings before this, and we would all joke about COVID, and then suddenly spring break in Athens, Georgia was when those jokes stopped being funny, right? Yeah. And I do remember vividly the Friday before spring break, or the Friday. Yeah, so it was the last day of class before spring break. I was leaving my office on campus, and I froze when I went out the door. And I looked around. I'm like, I'm not coming back here. Like I just had this weird feeling, like I knew things were getting serious, and I was like, I'm not coming back here. And I grabbed a bag and put my computer and everything in, which I never would do. Right? I put everything I thought I'd need in this bag. I didn't grab everything. There's still stuff there I wish I had, but I luckily did. I put everything in my bag and took it home with me. And I was like just floored, like I immediately knew I wasn't coming back there for a long time. So like that was one really weird thing. And then all the discussions we had, I was in Tampa, Florida the day that Tampa got their first case, right? So I was flying out of Tampa the day after they got their first case, and I was in the airport, and that was the first time I saw people with masks on. There were exchange students from some European country, and they all had masks on, and that was before everything shut down, obviously. And I was like, oh boy, this is getting serious. Should I have a mask on? Would it even help? It was like that kind of thing. And you start asking all these questions, and I'm in the airport online reading about it, looking at the people across from me, trying to decide if they have it or if they're trying to protect themselves. And, like all this stuff ran through your head that you had never really considered before. But I think because as scientists, we were talking about it and just talking about the interest in what was happening in China on a scientific level, you knew it was coming, right? There's no way of stopping it. And it's also one of these things people keep asking me, because I'm a biochemical engineer, is one of my trainings. And people that aren't from science keep asking me, when do you think we're going to get out? When are we going to go back? And I keep saying, I don't know how we can really go back until there's a vaccine. I don't know. Right. I don't know how this changes, next week, because they say it does. It's not going to change anything. It's still going to be out there. It's still going to be contagious. So if you know the science or listen to the scientists, like we're going to be in this for a long time. I think that's another thing that people have yet to accept, that this is, we may come out of this because we have to, but that's not going to stop everybody from still getting it. So it's going to be an interesting few months coming up.
Yeah, one of the things that was comforting about looking at the 1918 response in Athens was that we clamped down ahead of the counties around us, like we did this time. We took steps that even at the time people were recognizing were saving lives. But then you start to look at the history a little bit and you go, okay, so when did that vaccine come out? When in 1919 did the vaccine come out? And you're like, oh no, the real vaccine they needed didn't come out for like, I mean, 38 or something. I mean, it was like the full thing that they needed. And so people just adjusted their habits. I mean, things that have been part of everyday life for us, like, oh, a family member has come into town from out of the country. Let's go hug them immediately. Or, oh, I haven't seen that friend in forever. Let me give them a long hug and let's shake hands to everyone we see as a greeting. Sometimes the first time we've met somebody, it's interesting to read about how those habits changed and how we might have a long way to go. Like the new normal might change.
Right.
Um, I wanted just a couple things here. So Jennifer Lewis responded to your closet full of toilet paper. She said a closet full of toilet paper or a bidet. I'm seeing a lot of
Bidet.
bidet.
I did order a bidet, so we have a bidet now.
Yeah, I'm seeing them pop up on all my sponsored ads. I'm sure it's only a matter of time before I succumb. Jeremy had two questions here. I want to get to the first one. So with crude oil prices being down, does that present additional challenges to trying to convert to renewable materials for pressing or justifying it or anything like that?
Well, yeah. So I don't think for vinyl it's going to matter. I think our customers, generally artists want to support environmental causes. So our customers, we've done the research, they're willing to pay more for it, right? So if we can develop that product, there's a market for that. What I worry about right now, I work with a lot of facilities that produce renewable fuels. That's been a big part of my career until I recently changed to this innovation side of things. And right now, there's very little ethanol, very little biodiesel going anywhere right now. And we used to have a huge amount of both those fuels in our fuel mix, 10% ethanol, 5% biodiesel. The supply chain to get the raw materials to the facilities is broken down, right? So the reason the price of corn is so depressed right now is because ethanol plants are not buying corn because they're not making ethanol. Biodiesel plants are struggling to make biodiesel and sell it to people other than their close customers. It's partially because the demand for fuel has dropped. So even if they were selling it at the same levels or percentages, the level would drop just because the amount of fuel being used has dropped. But really the supply chain thing is a huge problem because biodiesel doesn't cut through the pipeline, for example. So it's not going with the rest of the fuel. You have to move it in trucks that aren't running right now.
Right.
So I think renewable fuels, from that standpoint, liquid renewable fuels are in trouble right now. I think we're going to have to recover from this. I don't know what's really going to happen there. Interestingly, one thing, I work a lot on solar too. And one thing that I've been telling everyone is, well, the supply chain is not hurting solar. If you have solar panels on the ground right now, they're producing electricity. It's on the grid. I think it's a real, and wind and hydro too. These energy sources are resilient to this kind of setback. There's no supply chain issue with those. So I think it really speaks volumes on those newer generation technologies, like why we should have more solar, right? We don't need someone to run a solar field. We need someone to run a coal plant. We need someone to run a gas plant. Right. You don't need that with electricity or with solar. You need someone to work at the substation and stuff like that. But the actual facility that's produces whether people are there or not. So I think for those technologies, we might see more interest because it helps with our resilience. And battery technologies, I think, are probably going to really get an even bigger push after this too, because that's the missing key to make those really effective.
Jeremy just added a comment, just said, as part of the question where he just said, I do hope that we'll change our societal mentality to more minimalist approach to many aspects of life. Only time will tell. I know one way in popular culture, for those of you that are looking back at this in the future, I've never seen so many people online baking bread. I've never seen so many people cooking. It's interesting. Our attitude towards eating out has changed where, and Dan, I'm sure you're noticing this too. Like when I used to eat out, I used to feel like I was making an irresponsible decision. Like, oh, I should be cooking tonight. And now I feel like some kind of patriot. Like I'm like, yeah, I'm supporting, Punta Cana. I want them to stay in business. I'm going to order, a Cuban right now. And, how have your food habits changed at all throughout this process?
Yeah, this is a good one for me to ask me. And this is almost embarrassing, but I'll be honest about it. So Before this, we ate out almost every meal. So
Yeah.
like we have kids, Lindsay and I, so we'd go to a restaurant every night and eat. Like that's what we did. It was part of our social, plan. And I would eat like a Jimmy John's sub every day for lunch, like because it was in between work and,
Right.
and home. So I'd get a Jimmy John's sub on the way to work. And now I've never cooked so much in my life. We get meal kits, and Lindsay cooks the real meals, and then I do the meal kits. So I've like learned how to cook. If I'm a scientist, right? So if I have a recipe in front of me, I can do it. It's not going to be great, but it's going to work out.
Yeah.
But we've been eating in almost every meal. We freaked out and had to have Little Italy last week, so we ordered a Little Italy pizza, and that was so good. That's one business that cannot go out of business. I cannot live without Little Italy. So
Yeah.
we're definitely supporting them. But for us, it's been the opposite. It's been way more cooking at home out of fear more than anything, unfortunately. Sort of warming up to the fact that, eating out is going to help our friends, because we have a lot of friends in the service industry, right? So we are helping them by eating out. So we've actually had the discussion this week, like, are we doing this wrong? Maybe we should be supporting our friends' businesses, So it's been a really weird thing for us, though, because I've basically learned how to cook in the past 3 weeks. So that's a good thing, right?
No, yeah, absolutely. I relate to what you're saying more than I let on, which is, so my wife and I, we do have a kid. That doesn't mean we weren't still eating out an embarrassing amount of time. Just because if you're both working full-time jobs, if you are lucky enough to have the fortunate enough to be able to afford, which is something that we don't all have, but to be able to afford to eat out. But even then, sometimes it's like fast food is just quicker. Your blood sugar's low. It's the end of the day. You just want to stuff something in your mouth. And now I'm finding myself not only cooking, but having to cook like 3 meals a day, because I can't go have a lunchtime meeting at the Grit, or I can't, so that's good. Well, I'm glad that hit home. What about, Dan, there may not be FOMO from an audience member capacity right now, but performance has been a big part of your life for a very, very long time. What does it feel like as a performer? Are you glad for the break? Is it sad for you not to be able to be out there and doing stuff with Booty Boys or whatever? What's going on there?
Yeah, that's probably the biggest struggle for me, because right now is prime Booty Boys season. We would be on the roof of the Georgia Theater every Saturday night, right? And it literally, the Saturday after this all started was going to be our first Booty Boys on the roof, right? Well, actually, we're going to do the Pride Prom, the queer prom at Little Kings that week, and then the week after that, we were going to start on the roof. So we had 2 huge events lined up, not to mention all the other little events that we had lined up, plus my band's shows. We had to cancel 3 shows now, 4 shows going on. Yeah, I'm struggling with that. I'm really missing Booty Boy season. The spring, doing that.
You guys do themed concerts, right? If I'm remembering correctly, like tend to do
events? We pit 2 famous artists against each other. Like Nicki Minaj against Cardi B or something like that. And then we do our own, mix after that. And this part is the best part, because the roof just opened. The roof of the Georgia Theater would just open. Everybody'd be super excited to get out there. The students are still in town. That roof is packed on Saturday nights, and it's so much fun. And not having the opportunity to do that is killing me. I miss that every Saturday night, especially the weather's been really good on most Saturdays. And, a lot of Saturdays last year it was raining. We're not seeing that as much this year. So it's been a struggle there for sure. That's probably like one of my least favorite things about this whole thing. And my band just released a single. So Vision Video just put out our first song.
Yeah.
We have 2 songs out now. We've never had anything out before. And that came out right at the beginning of this. It has allowed us to work on social media, and actually we've developed Dustin's sitting at home. Dustin's the singer. He's a paramedic and fireman. So he has 48-hour shifts, and then he has 48 hours off. And on those 48 hours off, he's just spending time promoting our band, and he's been doing a wonderful job at it. So thank you, Dustin. So that's been one interesting thing for us, is I've been kind of analyzing the music industry and thinking it seems like an opportunity for new artists, because I don't know that we would have got as much of a following internationally as we have, because people are sitting at home and thirsty for stuff right now. I think I feel worse for established bands that I had so many friends who were supposed to be on tour right now, and they all had to cancel their tours. I don't know what they're going to do. A lot of people just put out records, actually, that I'm friends with. And being an established artist, you're really losing this key time to get traction with that new release, right? So I think it favors new young art. Well, not young. I'm not young, but my band is young, and the people in it are. So it favors younger artists, new artists, trying to get a foothold right now. I think there's a real opportunity there, and then we've actually been able to take advantage of that. So I'd say it's real. I worry about the bands that had these big tours planned because, man, that sucks.
Yeah.
Not going to be able to have the same momentum when they come back in because everybody's going to be throwing new stuff out as soon as this ends, right? So
Right.
they kind of get swept under the rug if they put it out 3 months ago.
Yeah, I think we're going to come out of this with a lot of really bad Mountain Goats-esque. Not that Mountain Goats is bad, Mountain Goats is great, but I just mean a lot of people are.
Bedroom pop, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but I'm saying a lot of folks are gonna. I love Mountain Goats. Let me be clear, but we're gonna have a lot of folks with cassettes coming out of this with like forlorn, lonely albums, and I agree. All good artists should release music now. Like I know that like the new Run the Jewels album's done. Let's get it out. I need
We're all sitting
music
here. I mean, why not, right? I mean, you're right.
Release it upon us.
I think The Weeknd's an interesting example because he put his record out right at the beginning of this, and he's dominating the charts right now. And people sitting at home, I'm listening to that record a lot.
Right.
I mean, so if you do it right, and I'm also looking at The Weeknd had a huge tour booked, and it was going to make him a lot of money for sure.
Right.
But also, he's still going to make a ton of money, and he doesn't have to go on tour if he doesn't like going on tour. I don't know how he feels about it. He's still young. He probably likes it. But a lot of established artists don't like that part of it. And, he's able to leverage the situation and still, be on top of the game and not have to tour, right? So there's some advantage.
And with what you're saying, by the time he does end up doing that postponed tour, it'll feel less like touring on a new album and more like touring on a greatest hits.
Right, because we'll have those songs, that's for sure.
Michelle Wynn, our fabulous interim director at the Welcome Center, said she'd be down to stream a Booty Boys mix under isolation. Maybe you can have Booty Boys versus coronavirus. That can be the theme.
That's good. Wow, that's really good. So Alfredo, Musication, one of the Booty Boys, he's going to be streaming live on Twitch and Instagram as well. He's the one with all the skills. Like we all have our special strengths in the Booty Boys, and his strength is definitely those mixing skills. So he's going to be doing some live streams coming up, sort of representing the whole Booty Boys crew. So.
Well, when those links become available or when you know more, let us know and we'll share it with our general audience that's following this. So, Dan, we're about 3/4 of the way through here, and I want to make sure we're getting to just about everything. One question that we're asking a lot of folks, by the way, if you're just tuning in and you have a question or a comment that you want to share with Dan or with us for posterity, and you want to enter into this historic record that we're creating here, feel free to just jump in the comment section and live forever. We will share it on the screen and we'll get to it and ask your question or share your comment. Dan, as far as someone in Athens, I know you mentioned the service industry. When you're talking to your friends that are in the service industry right now, I imagine this is a really scary time for them. There's been a lot of talk about how many Athens' favorite restaurants that are currently closed, whether or not they'll open again. Are there places you're especially worried about, or are there places that you'd urge people who are watching this to support?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the bar scene that like the bars on the Pulaski side of town, right? These are bars that have been around forever, and this is my stomping ground, our stomping ground. I really worry about them because it really does support the music scene, right? The bartenders that sling your drinks are also the bands that are struggling to make it in Athens and in 2 years may be famous, right? But you can't do that if the bars aren't there to give them these jobs where they can go on tour and come back, right? So I don't know how we support the bars, and it seems crazy saying, oh, support the bars in Athens. But I'm talking about the bars that have been here for 25 years, the 40 Watt, Liquor, all those bars, Manhattan, Low Kings, all those places that really support the music scene. They're the bedrock of the music scene. Not only are they having the shows, but that's where we all work and while we're trying to make it, right? So without that infrastructure, it's going to be harder for Athens to be this haven of creatives, right? So, and the fear is that some of our bars will go out of business. Some of the bars from other side of town will come down and open up, and those run very differently, right? They change names every year, they change staff every year, right? And it's just a different thing, right? So I'm afraid of that happening. I think you can read between the lines about what
No,
I'm
I
worried
mean,
about.
so let's I mean, we can say the quiet part loud. I mean, there certainly we recognize that the University of Georgia's here and that there's a transient population, and one of the rites of passage as an undergraduate student is having bars that you work at or your friends work at, or you're going to see your friend behind the bar. I mean, that's something I remember doing in undergrad. It's something that happens. But then there's also these more community driven bars where you might have a relationship with that bartender for decades. And so it sounds like your concern is us losing. I've watched the way Flickr's been grappling with this online. I know that the 40 watt, I can't imagine life without the 40 watt. Is that your concern, just kind of losing some of these community watering holes?
Yeah, and really, I mean, but really, they are the bedrock of the scene here, right? Like, without all
Right.
those places, we don't have this. There's no reason for like young musicians to move here and try to make it, right? Like, that's why we facilitate such a cool music scene, is because we have that infrastructure
Right.
here, and I would hate to lose that. So I mean, I think that's what I worry about the most, and I do think about that a lot as we have to cancel shows at all these places. It's like, wow, what are those guys doing? You know?
Well, and you and I have talked in the past about the ripple effect of even losing one place like that. Like when, my old man on my lawn routine is always to talk about how much we lost when we lost Tasty World.
Right.
But you need bars that frankly could be making more money if they were willing to cater to a more collegiate audience, but there's something either right with them or wrong with them, and they're willing to dedicate their nights to bands that are lucky to be able to bring in a $5 cover, but they can try stuff out and find their sound the way you have with your bands. Or, so I think about, if we lost World Famous, or God forbid we lost Caledonia or the 40 watt, I mean, is that the kind of ripple effect you would worry about?
Yeah, one thing I'm hearing from my friends who are booking tours right now for after this, so people are starting to book for fall, winter, hoping that they actually get to go on tour then. These
Yeah.
clubs are having what they call matinee shows. So you book a 6 o'clock show that goes from 6 until 9, and then you have another show that goes from 10 until 2, right? So they're going to start stacking up. So the people that should be on tour right now have an opportunity to play, and the people that should be on tour in fall or winter can play as well.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling we'll probably see that happening in Athens too. But then you go, wow, can I go to a club from 6 until 2? I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to be there still too.
No, I mean, this is something where, at Historic Athens, we have scheduled and been advertising since last year, October 18th, as the second annual Porch Fest. And we have homeowners that have already reconnected with their bands from last year that are already making plans to go over the top this year. And it's one of those things where it's April and we have to keep moving forward as if this thing is happening, but you don't know what October could bring. I want to ask you, as a music scene person, what did it feel like to see that Athfest was canceled this year? What does that feel like?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, that, I guess, that's one of those moments where you knew this was real, right? I mean, even though intellectually as a scientist, I knew that was real, that one was like emotionally, I knew this was real, right? I mean, that's like one of the biggest things. The bike race, I mean, Twilight getting canceled, that's a huge night for Booty Boys and for all the acts, all the bars in town. The big thing that we're worried about now is, are we going to get to do Rumpus? I mean, if I don't get a Rumpus, then I'm really upset. That Booty Boy show at Rumpus is the highlight of my year. So if that doesn't happen, I'm devastated already, right? So, so there's these landmark things that are slowly disappearing that are scary and devastating, right?
Right. Yeah. Timmy Conley's broadcasting almost nightly. I'm noticing her every day. And we talk about coiled spring. I think that if he has to somehow pull a Santa Claus and go to everyone's house in one night, I think we're going to have a rumpus one way or another. But yeah, no, it's unimaginable to have in Athens where that doesn't happen. All right. So as we have about 10 minutes left here, two questions. One is we've been asking everyone, and it sounds like Little Italy would have been on your list, but is there any, what are the places right now in Athens that it's driving you crazy you can't go? Like, what are you missing right now?
So, well, I'll give an interesting one because I wouldn't be able to go there anyway, but Go Bar, that's always been my home, and they closed right before all this happened, right? They're coming back as a restaurant in probably next year now, I'm guessing. But, on a night, like when bad things happen, like certain elections in our recent history.
Right.
I want to be a Go bar with people that think like me and that I love, like the owners, Tom and Mark are two of my best friends. And that's where I'd be going right now. Right. But they aren't even open. So.
Yeah. I was wearing my black and white end of Go bar t-shirt yesterday. I didn't get one of the cool swanky color ones, but
I didn't get any of them, by the way. I played the last show there and they forgot to give me a shirt.
Well, you helped define the place. I think you'd be okay. Daniel Borman's just chimed in to say he's going to miss Athfest this year. We know, Daniel, it's for those of us that live in Athens and love Athens, it's hard to imagine it not happening. But all of our support out to Jill and everyone who had to make the responsible decision in advance there. Dan, my last question to you is, or at least my last scheduled one, then we'll open the floor for anything else you want to share. Part of what we do at Historic Athens is historic preservation. I know in June, we're going to do our 51st annual preservation awards. So if you're watching this, you can go to historicathens.com right now to nominate any historic preservation work that you think was really notable this year, or any publications, books about history that came out this year that you think are notable. Also, if there's any local historic places you think are in danger that you would like to nominate for our annual Athens Places in Peril initiative, you can do that at historicathens.com. So we want to plug that. Before I throw to my question, Deborah's just chiming in to say that, and this is true and mind-blowing to think that there are now some universities and colleges around the country saying they won't open until January 2021. I know, Dan, you mentioned that your fiance works in the healthcare field. My wife is a school teacher, and I know education and healthcare are all trying to figure out how this works. But my question to you is, right after a recession, which we're starting to experience right now, people tend to move quickly on new development, and sometimes that can endanger historic sites. So what we're asking each of our guests to share is, what are some of your favorite historic sites from around Athens? What are the places that we should be looking to protect? Anything come to mind that you really value?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if these are considered actually historic, but they're historic to me. So I guess sure. It's I've been lucky to have several acts in the Athens music scene, starting in the 90s. Every 10 years I seem to be doing something a little bit different, and they have sort of a different home. The easiest one is the Georgia Theater, right? Of course, I don't see that going away, but that is historic. I think we all know that. And the home for the Booty Boys, it's a big part of my life right now. Great people there, love everybody. Then the 40 watt was like the original one for us, where we started Kindercore basically out of the 40 watt. And I think there is a real threat there, right? I think, the 40 watt isn't as secure. They're not owned by a big corporation. Barry has to keep that place open herself. So, like you said, that would be just catastrophic, I think. And then, that at least, Go Bar is going to be a restaurant now. The Grit's in there, that little building. I don't know if that's historic or not, but it should be. Sure. I mean, that's a lot of important stuff has happened there in Athens history, certainly. And it's, right across the street from where that big development's going. So it could be an interesting target for people if that place succeeds. Just want to keep that character. And then going down the street even more to Daly. I mean, the building may not be as important as that, establishment, right? We get a lot of our produce there. Yeah. That's another place I worry about because of all this, right?
Yeah. Well, our offices are at 489 Prince and that old fire hall right in between the two places you're describing.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, both the building and the things in them matter. And in Athens, without the places you just named, would not feel like Athens at all. Daniel is speaking for, not you, Daniel, but Daniel said it very well, which is we really appreciate having Dan with us. Dan, our hope, as we said at the top of the hour, is to donate this to the Hargret Collections Library, the Athens Clarke County Library. 50, 60 years from now, if some researcher is viewing this interview, what else would you like to share about this moment in Athens history, coronavirus or beyond? What should people know?
Yeah, I think, I am a big part of the university, and it's a big part of my life too. So I'll speak a little bit about what I'm doing there with the Innovation Gateway and the startups group. One thing we're doing right now is this COVID-19 design sprint that we started yesterday. And basically, we put this out last week saying we want students to work on solutions to big problems with COVID-19, and we offered some prize money for it. We had 160 students show up online yesterday to volunteer to work on these problems. We had subject matter experts from all over Athens and all over the state, really, from healthcare and from all different places, talking about the problems that they're experiencing. For example, Dustin from my band talked about what it's like to be a paramedic right now, and the things that they need that would be really great to help protect them and protect their patients. So despite we're talking a lot about Athens, I think the university is really stepping up hard on working on the problem, and that's really, it's the whole community, right? I mean, it's the researchers live here; they're part of our lives forever. And a lot of the research on the vaccines are going on there, and some of the epidemiology work that we're hearing about is coming right from University of Georgia here in Athens. So I think the impact that the university is having on this, slowing it down, stopping it, I think cannot be underestimated. So those people are at work in their labs when all the rest of us get to stay home. So I want to make sure everybody remembers them.
Good. Jennifer just shared a link to the COVID-19 Designs Gateway through research.uga.edu. So you can find that in the comment section. Dan, if there's any links that you think our audience should be aware of, feel free to come back later and drop them in the comment section. I have to tell you, I really appreciate, for those of you that are tuning in right now, we are amazed. Yet we were looking at our insights, and it looks like each day about 14 to 1,600 people are being impacted by these conversations. We're having hundreds of views. And so we appreciate all of you in the now that are watching this and participating in this. Gary Birch, Gary and Joan made this week possible. Gary just chimed in to say, Joan and I got on late, but really enjoyed what we saw and heard. Nice work, Tommy and Dan. Thank you, Gary. Dan, we know you have so many things to do. We want to thank you for doing them. And thank you for sharing your time with us. And, we look forward to seeing you in person when we're allowed. Also, before we got on air, Dan made a good recommendation that Dustin, who he referenced earlier, should be one of our invited guests. So I'll be reaching out to Dustin, and we're trying to get paramedics' view on this. So hopefully we can bring Dustin on. For those of you that wish to tune in tomorrow, Janet Geddes, who is the owner-operator of Avid Bookshop, will be with us. And then on Friday, we'll be with Commissioner Russell Edwards, who's been working really hard to try to make sure Athens is out on the forefront of protecting our community here. Deborah chimed in to say, thank you, Dan, for mentioning it. I'd love UGA to get the news out more of what they're doing to help the community. So that brings us to the end of our broadcast. We want to thank you so much for Dan for joining us, and all the audience for joining us. Thanks for Alex Sams for just chiming in. Dan, thank you so much. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk to you more soon. Okay.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Bye. All right. And we are going to stop going